Well, tonight the manifestos are out, but their substance depends on who you talk to. And on the program this evening, we now want to dissect the Raila Odinga and William Ruto blueprints. And joining us in studio for that is ODM's Executive Director, Odwor Ongwen, together with David D, who's the head of the Kenya Kwanza Policy and Programs team. Gentlemen, to the both of you, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Asante. David D, I'll start with you because your manifesto is one of the latest in town. And it's been, getting straight to the point, it's been dismissed by your critics as a renamed version of the Big Four agenda, too populist and too detailed to be a manifesto. On national TV this evening, I want to give you a chance to respond to those statements.
Our manifesto, we have called it the plan. We have called it the plan for a reason. And that reason is what the country needs at this point in time, we say, is a turnaround plan for the economy. So we have focused. If you look at the manifesto, it is not a catalogue of promises that we'll do this and we'll do the other. We have focused on crystallizing what the challenges the country faces in terms of the economy, and therefore it is more of an exercise in persuasion. So there is a coherent logic in it of a strategy. And I think that's what's confounding people, because they are much more accustomed to promises.
So a lot of the feedback has been surprise.
No. We appreciate that it is quite a huge paradigm shift in terms of what people are accustomed to. Mm-hmm. Because it spends if you look at it, it spends a lot of time on diagnostics. Why this? Okay, the why, then the how, and the what. You know, very, very much about that. So if you look at our manifesto, every chunk of it, it says we are facing something we are calling a perfect storm. And that perfect storm is the convergence of three forces that you shouldn't have converging. One, we have a structural problem of unemployment, an economy that does not create jobs. And alongside that structural problem, there's a problem of productivity, particularly in agriculture, which has stagnated for a very long time. So your productive economy is not working well, it's not very productive, and it is not creating jobs. On that has been compounded by a debt crisis. Now, the reason why we're in a debt crisis is because we went on an infrastructure building binge, as I call it, using borrowed money. And we have borrowed that money domestically and abroad. So what that has done, two things. The money we've borrowed domestically crowded out the private sector. So the government started borrowing all the money, and therefore there was no money going to the business sector, and that has compounded your problem of unemployment and productivity. And then the other thing it has done, the money we have borrowed abroad, for the first time we have borrowed money in the commercial sector abroad. We floated bonds, sovereign bonds. That has made us exposed to global shocks, particularly financial shocks. Okay? We have never had that before. So the first time we went into the markets. So the third factor is that those shocks that it has made us vulnerable to have happened.
Okay.
So we have crystallized by two things, COVID and then the war. So the consequence of that is that global prices are rising, inflation and interest rates. The rising inflation has increased the cost of the things we import. Mm-hmm. The rising interest rates have made it difficult for us to refinance our commercial debt. So if you look at what's happening, government isn't able to refinance the commercial debt, and central bank is rationing foreign exchange because the things you're buying for $1 before are now costing $4.
Okay. And we're going to get deeper into the debt conversation. I just wanted to understand your immediate reaction to those who have, sort of raised those concerns about your manifesto.
I don't think...
Briefly, what would you say is the answer to that?
I don't think they're actually saying anything because they have not engaged it.
Okay. Let me hear from Oduor on their manifesto. Let me tell you what critics have said about the Azimio manifesto. It's been deemed as highly theoretical, long on promises, but short on detail. Now I give you a chance to respond to that analysis by some.
Manifestos, by their very nature, are basically statements of intention. And before I even explain this a little more in detail, I hope what David tweeted this morning was in jest, because then otherwise it betrays the intention behind their manifesto. When he says manifestos are to win elections. So the seriousness that should be in a manifesto, we don't see there. But that is not
I may have
what
seen
I want
something
to say.
like that.
Yeah,
What did you read? What did you read? What did you read into that?
It was actually, yeah.
What was your takeaway from that when you read that?
No, basically he said that their real intentions, if you want to get it, you don't go and look at the manifesto. Basically, that's what the tweet was all about.
I think you've left out the important context.
Yeah.
The second part of the tweet said...
Briefly, so that we will...
Yeah, because I still want to talk about...
The second part of it said, you do not provide details which affect appointments of people and positions before the election because it divides people. So because somebody was asking for details of execution, and I said, you see, there are people in those positions in government. So you cannot say that we are going to put so-and-so here and so there. You don't create, in fact I said, you do not put details which create winners and losers. This early? This early. So in this business, what you do is focus on persuading voters. But if you start creating winners, if you say we are going to reform institution X, you already create resistance. Okay,
no.
That was the point.
Okay, what David is saying must have been in his head, because that's not in the tweet.
It is there.
That's not in the tweet. But let me go to the Azimio manifesto. We are coming from an extremely bad position as a country, with an economy that is on its knees. And why is the economy on its knees? Because Kenya as a country, we have fitted perfectly into this global division of labor, where as a country, we extract, we don't even produce, we extract primary commodities, export them. We grow coffee there, here, with an intention that some old lady in Europe is going to take coffee. We extract our hides and skins and export them. And then we end up importing even watch straps. Everything, almost everything we consume is manufactured or processed or value added from outside. So we are basically a consumer economy. So basically, Azimio, if you look at our manifesto, it's about production. And this production is going to be driven by manufacturing. Now, this manufacturing cannot stand alone. Our manufacturing has to be linked to agriculture. It has to be linked to ICT. It has to be linked to the resources we have in abundance, but we have not been able to use. And that is the blue economy. Whether you are talking about sea resources, fisheries, blue tourism, blue biotechnology, all these become building blocks of our manufacturing. And then we go ahead and pinpoint about 10 areas that we want to concentrate on in the first 18 months.
And those are your 10
and we are flattered that actually Kenya Kwanza picked about 4 of them.
And in their manifesto?
In their manifesto.
So we're going to get into the details of the manifesto, and I have some graphics that will be running shortly. But Dr. D, because Azimio released their manifesto first, and you probably had a chance to look at it before you released yours, what is the key difference between the Kenya Kwanza manifesto and the Azimio manifesto in your view?
One, the Azimio manifesto does not mention this economic crisis that Oduor has talked about. And if you listen to what he's saying, it does not deal with a crisis. It's a development manifesto. It says that we produce primary commodities. In Kenya, we don't produce primary commodities. That's usually mining economies. He says that we are a consumer economy. They haven't done their homework because we are not a consumer economy. If you look at our total imports of consumer goods and you compare with our manufactured outputs, they're actually less than 10%. So if you look at the composition of our imports, it's primarily raw materials and capital equipment, machinery. The one thing that we are importing a lot these days, which we shouldn't, is primary food, which is something we address very, very severely. So the fundamental difference is that their manifesto is a traditional development manifesto. We are going to industrialize. And this is the sectors we are going to industrialize. It's talking about sectors. Our manifesto does not talk about sectors. It talks about people, creating jobs for people, equipping people with capital. Let me finish. It also says now, because we are in a crisis, our manifesto, how do we turn around the economy and navigate this turbulence, first in the first 18 months, and then in a period of less than 3 years. And then we say we have to hit 3 critical things. We need economic activities that create jobs, that generate foreign exchange, that expand the tax base. Why? Because it is when people work and they are productive, they are connected. When people work and productive, that's how you generate tax. That's how you expand your market. And given the foreign exchange situation, we have to do things which either reduce our imports very quickly or increase our exports very quickly. Actually, they do both. And that's why I'm saying our manifesto is a strategy for getting out of the crisis. The Azimio manifesto has no prioritization because we are saying, if you look at our implementation, if you look at our implementation section,
David is running away from what
our implementation section says implementation has to pass 4 critical things. One is prioritization. You can't do all things at once. Number 2 is sequencing. Where are your quick wins? Number 3 is financing. As of now, we have to do it within the fiscal constraints of the crisis. And number 4 is execution.
And this is where
does the rubber hit the road?
Okay.
There is no such thing in the Azimio manifesto.
You have both manifestos there.
I have both of them here.
Okay, you can spread them out on the table as you carry on with your response. Go ahead.
Yes. If you look at this yellow manifesto and these blue ones, number 1, David is not speaking the truth when he says that we are running away from the fact that there is a crisis. Actually, even in the forward by our party leader, he talks about the crisis that the country is facing. The difference between us and Kenya Kwanza is that for them, the crisis starts and is firmly placed at the doorstep of Uhuru Kenyatta government, which they have been part of for the better part of the last 10 years. For us, we recognize structural deficiencies in how we manage our economy. And that is why you'll see, basically, in the first part of both manifestos, we are looking at the microeconomics. The second bit, the macroeconomic problems that have led to the inability of the microeconomy to work are absent in the Kenya Kwanza manifesto, because for them it is about running away from what Kenyatta government has been doing. But in attempt to run away, they basically come up with exactly the same things that are in the Big Four agenda. Basically, if you do a matrix on each of these, I can tell you where it is in the Big Four agenda and what has been done about it. the other thing about Kenya Kwanza Manifesto, they are talking about things that are already in the government budget and saying they're going to do them. And I will enumerate some of them.
As we continue.
Yes.
Thank you for that.
Let me respond. Our manifesto starts with a political economy analysis of where the rain started hitting us.
You've actually opened to page 6 or 7?
The economic transformation imperative. Mm-hmm. Okay? And we start with the 1960s Africanization. And we say that is where the problem of state capture began. And we start by quoting the NCCK report, Who Owns Industry in Kenya, 1967. We then move to the ILO report of 1972, which talked about concentration of wealth and capital at the top. We then talk about sessional paper number 1 of 1986, which said we must start. We can only, the capital is not enough to create white-collar jobs. We must start putting money in the small-scale agriculture and the informal sector. And that is how we trace how we have ended up with a structural problem that our debt crisis and the global shocks have now converged into a perfect storm. Once we move from the political economy analysis to the perfect storm, then we talk about why bottom up, which says, why are we proposing we change the model? We are changing the model because if you look at the economy as a pyramid, the little top up there, we have 800,000 young people joining the labor force every year. The little up there, which we call formal economy, formal establishment, public and private sector, only absorbs 50,000. So let's call it white collar, 50,000. Below that, you have blue collar, what we might call SME. It absorbs about 150,000. And then below, we have what I call no collar. Yeah, that's where 600,000 Kenyans are ending every year. Now, it takes more than 1 million shillings at least to create a white-collar job, between 1 and 2 million shillings. It takes 200,000 to create a blue-collar job. You can create a job in this no-collar place, a decent job, for 50,000 shillings. Now, what it takes to create one job there can create 20 jobs here.
And that is logical. And we've had that before.
And therefore, if you have the 1 million shillings, which if it's 1 to 20, the 50,000 jobs created here, if that capital was deployed here, it could create 1 million jobs.
What is the difference between what you're proposing right now and devolution?
Because, let me explain. Let me finish.
First of all, I want to correct the...
No. Devolution is something we have done in the state sector. It is about government. We are talking about the economy, the business sector, agriculture, manufacturing, building and construction. We are not talking about public goods. We are talking about where we invest money to create jobs and raise productivity.
Oduor.
Yeah, again, David is trying to veer us off what they are talking about. Because first of all, when he talks about investing 1 million to create 50 jobs, I don't think he's being realistic. It's simply because of the kind of... The only thing I would agree with David is about the so-called state capture. Because this economy has for a long time been controlled by what we call the comprado bourgeoisie, who are basically people who are agents of foreign capital and therefore have basically crowded out local entrepreneurship. But having said that, you cannot tell me that you would basically block out local and international capital and still be able to create jobs. Because I will give you an example. This country, we import 98% of the glass we consume in this country.
98%?
98%. And most of that is imported from Egypt. It's not even from outside the continent. And yet, what you need to produce glass? Simple. You need sand, you need soda, soda ash. And this is what we have in this country. So where is the problem? The problem is we have not been able to address things that would spur investment. If we used the soda we produce at Magadi Soda with our sand here and address the issue of cost of electricity, we address the issue of taxation, we address the issue of the management of the labor force, the industrial relations, basically, we are going to be able to use very, very available local resources to create thousands of jobs. Yes, you can be able to create, even with 10,000 shillings, you can be able to create an enterprise. But this will be family enterprise. Family enterprises, of course, once you want to spread this, to say cover 2 million people, how many 50,000 shillings will you invest across the board to be able to do that?
Let me interrupt you. Odor, let me ask you this. One of the criticisms against the Kenya Kwanza Manifesto, there's been a feeling that it does not identify corruption and the looting of public funds as a challenge facing this country. You said you've read it. Do you get that sense before David D jumps in?
I was coming to that because there was this economic pillar, they have the social pillar, and they have the governance. And definitely, it has been very, very cleverly avoided. And for a reason. David himself has said many times
you left us hanging
that corruption should not be an issue in this election because corruption has been weaponized, corruption has been politicized, but the issue of governance, the issue of rent-seeking in this country, the issue of creating conclaves of cronies that basically see the state as a place where they siphon money for private purposes, that has been a major problem. But I'm sure there is a reason why Kenya Kwanza gave a wide berth to the issue of corruption. David is the one who can be able to answer that question.
In a country where a former Auditor General cited loss of funds to corruption at about 30% of our annual budget, anywhere roughly between 500 billion to 1 trillion, if I put figures to that, does it concern you that, yes, you do mention state capture, but corruption and looting of public funds did not quite receive the attention some thought it would in your manifesto?
Let me say, the first of all, that's not Auditor General. I'll tell you where that figure comes from. But let me respond to the manifesto and the question is talking about creating jobs. Glassmaking is a very capital-intensive industry. So if you do a glassmaking plant, it's going to take you maybe 3 million shillings to create one job. Okay? Now, the numbers I have given are factual. They come from our National Economic Service, KNBS, surveys of micro-enterprises of industry. Now, there is also research. At our level of development, we have the most capital-intensive manufacturing sector. The number we are talking about, 1 million plus, is over $10,000. The average for Africa is about 5 or 6. If you go to South Asia, Bangladesh and India, the people we are trying to compete with in the export sector is about 1,000 or 2,000. So the amount of money that takes to create one manufacturing job, like glassmaking here, will create 10 garment jobs in Bangladesh. Now, let me talk about why we are talking about this very deliberately. How do we become so capital intensive? Recently, we launched a gun-making factory.
Yes.
Its cost 4 billion shillings. We said it will create 100 jobs. That is 40 million shillings per job. In the same economy, the county government of Kitui set up a garment factory. It cost them 168 million shillings. It has a capacity for 600 jobs. 280,000 shillings per job. The money for the gun factory, at the cost of creating garment, that labor-intensive jobs, would have created 14,000 jobs. Our economy is capital-intensive by design.
Okay.
So, and that's where the state capture problem is most severe. State capture is not an end in itself. The purpose of state capture is to repurpose the state institutions to make policy that benefits the people at the top, make returns to capital higher than they would be in a free market. Now, you say we have not addressed corruption.
Can I actually read a question from a viewer?
Yes,
viewer says, this is Kilonzo Daniel Muli, the elephant in the room is corruption.
Yep.
Can David D tell Kenyans tonight how William Ruto and the Kenya Kwanza Alliance will fight corruption should he win? It is in the public domain that Kenya Kwanza has in totality ignored corruption.
Let me be very
discussions.
clear. You have to have a theory of change if you want to change something. What's our theory of change? Our theory of change is that the executive cannot police itself. And it so happens that's exactly how the writers of the Constitution, which include Oduor Ongwen and myself, saw it. So all democracies create independent oversight institutions because they know that once you give the executive the authority to control and spend money, they need somebody else to watch over them. When you say that the president is going to fight corruption, what you're saying, he has the power to decide who gets caught and who doesn't get caught. Okay? So we have said our job is to deliver on the economy. What we shall do is empower the people who are supposed to watch us so that they can do the job. Why are they not watching us? Because they are captured.
When did the principals of Kenya Kwanza, who have formed 60 to 70% of Jubilee, discover that those institutions were captured?
I'm the one who has pushed that agenda.
Are those who are your principals, are they aware of your concerns?
They are persuaded that the way to get all of us out of this, because when we started working together, they were under intense pressure of weaponization of corruption against them politically.
Okay.
So they learned that it is not good. You know, there's this thing which we say that if you are creating a cell, a prison cell, think about the cell that you could end up in. So my teammates now, when they were on the other side, they did not think that the shoe would ever be on the other foot. So, and it happens. So let's be honest. It happens that they have borne the brunt of weaponization, but they made their bed. They're the ones who made that bed. So they're lying on it. So the fact that we have taken the position that the best system to have is the one envisaged by the Constitution. I was sitting in the audience. Let me finish.
And after this, I'll jump.
I was sitting in the audience in Chatham House in London when William Ruto was asked this question. And unprompted, and we were sitting in the front row with many of our colleagues. And as you know, many of our colleagues have baggage. And I don't think he was prompted. I don't think he was speaking to them. And he was explaining and said, look, the point I am trying to make is that it is not the president's job to police even his own government. It is between the people who do corruption and the law. Okay? So now, I do not know what anybody else, whether that person is Uhuru Kenyatta or Raila Odinga, or anybody can make as credible as a commitment as to say, look, I will relinquish all the controls that we have refused to relinquish to the judiciary, to the DCI, to the anti-corruption, so that if I, William Ruto, as president, is culpable, I can be investigated.
Okay, fair enough. Oduor, come in. And tell us about your zero tolerance to corruption, which is in the Azimio Manifesto.
I will come back to that, but I want to first go back to what David has said here.
that in Kenya, Kenya is one of the most expensive countries.
Capital-intensive manufacturing sectors at our level of development.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And ask yourself why. And then you look at the structure of government, how it has been, but more so, basically it has been about rent-seeking. It's about corruption. It's about people trying to see what they can get out of an investor. There are so many people who have come to this country trying to establish businesses, not necessarily manufacturing, but manufacturing included. But before they can even be given some form to fill, already they have been asked, what is my stake in this? What do I get out of this? And so on. That is number one. Number two, the cost of energy is out of this world. And let's look for the last 20 years who have been in the control of the energy sector. It has been who is who in successive government. And that is where the biggest rent-seeking takes place. To the extent that even the level of generation we have been trying to achieve with, say, our power, if you leave other forms of energy, we are unable to reach it because of the kind of corruption that is in this sector. But the most important thing is we as Azimio, we have said very clearly that there are 4 things we are going to look at when somebody wants to invest, whether you are a local investor or you are a foreign investor. Number 1, how much of the local resources you are going to use as your input. Number 2, how much foreign exchange is this investment either going to generate for the country or save for the country? Number 3, how much employment is it going to create? How many jobs? And number 4, what kind of technology is it going to bring about, to disperse amongst the Kenyan youth and basically the production sector? Those 4 criteria, if you look at them and then you create an enabling environment in terms of the macroeconomics, we'll be able to make productive sector in this country competitive.
One word on
no, just one more. I want to give you an example. We have a very thriving leather industry here in Kariako. The government even went out of its way and brought equipments. For the last 10 years or so, these equipments have been lying there. These people cannot be able to expand their potential to create jobs for our people. The reason being, there's no land to set them up. Yet there are tracts and tracts of land which are owned by the government, but because it is not the Ministry of Trade and Industrialization, these enterprises cannot be settled there. So these are some of the structural issues that we must be able to address as a nation. Now, you asked me about zero tolerance
to corruption. And David D's assertion that his principles, when Stall was rosy, did not have too much of a problem with institutions that were not independent, but now on the other side, feel that it's important to have independent institutions. Talk to me about that dichotomy, even as you, respond.
Even before I respond, what guarantee do we have that when it will be rosy, they will fall back to what they are used to? Because if he's saying it's just because the shoe is on the other foot, yeah, how about if the shoe is shifted again? But you see, the corruption, fighting corruption, first of all, needs people's mindset about everybody being able to be part of our society. This is called inclusive inclusive citizenship. At the moment, you know, I see anything that belongs to the public, and I think it belongs to nobody. That is number one, mindset. We must be able to educate our people about the consequences of corruption. Because corruption at the moment is so instilled, and we start instilling it in kids when they're young. We steal exams for them. That is the ecosystem that we have created. So the first thing, you deal with that ecosystem. Number two, you create policies, laws, and plans that are able to punish corruption. So that if you use anything that is not yours, if I steal this shirt, I should be jailed because I'm a thief. It should be the same if I take a pen out of an office which does not belong to me. Number three, the political leadership must show commitment to fighting corruption. You can have all the laws, all the institutions, but if there is no commitment at the level of leadership, however good those systems are, however good those laws are, you will never be able to deal with this.
Okay.
So when we talk about zero tolerance, it's not just tolerance to people. It's a tolerance to institutions, to laws, to policies that feed on corruption.
Okay. David, I'm due for a break. Is it one word?
No, it's not one word.
It's not one word. Hold it. Let's take that break. When we come back, I run you through a bit of feedback. I'm seeing a lot of questions from viewers. They want to hear from these two gentlemen here. Oduor Ongwen, Executive Director, ODM. David D, Head of Kenya Kwanza Policy and Programs Team. Believe it or not, these two gents were on the same side, same team about 3 years ago. Now, it's a different ball game altogether. They are coming with different manifestos, and they say their manifesto is the solution to the challenge that Kenya finds itself in. Do you believe them?
We are very good friends.
It's up to you, but they tell me they're good friends, but their manifestos, a different matter altogether. 22422 is the SMS line, #NewsNight. We carry on with that discussion on the other side.